Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
You know, it's not often on this program we get to talk to somebody who has made a mark in music over decades in terms of writing, producing, performing, working with many artists as well. And he's here. Interesting insight we're going to get on the music industry then and now. Tony Mantor joins us on the program. Hey, Tony, how you doing?
I'm doing good. You?
Well, you're in Nashville, right?
Nashville, yeah. Been here for 30 years.
Wow. I don't know why, but when we talk, you seem so fresh about Nashville that I would swear you moved there like 3 years ago. I don't know why. I guess it's just I guess it always still stays fresh.
Yeah, it does. I mean, Nashville has changed dramatically over the last 25, 30 years. But even with all the change, you still have good music coming out. You've got new music coming out. You've got people coming to Nashville to try and chase their dreams. I mean, it's a great city to be in if you love music and want to pursue it.
Yeah, that's what somebody told me recently, and I've never been there, which I can't believe. Out of being in music, playing music on the radio for years, I've never got there yet. But I'm always told that there's music everywhere. You go to the gas station, there's somebody performing. You go, somewhere on a corner, there's somebody performing music. Is it kind of like that?
In places. I mean, you go down on Broadway and you can go around and you hear music all the time, different people doing different things. The great thing about Nashville is when you think about Nashville, a lot of people think about country music.
Sure.
And it is so far from country music now. I mean, needless to say, it's still country. You still got all the country artists here and the country labels here and everything. But an influx of people have come in from all over the country and all over the world that do all kinds of genres of music. We got rock, we got rap, we got R&B. I mean, we've got jazz, we've got everything here now, and it's really grown to be a mecca of music rather than just And when they say Music City, USA. It's really Music City now because it's about all music, not just one style.
Yeah, I think back to what you just said and Taylor Swift. And in the beginning, when she first emerged, people viewed her as country. Oh, she's a country artist, and broke free from that chain right away to go mainstream. You think that happens with a lot of artists, that they're perceived to be country and then they get out of that?
Well, in some cases, but country has changed too. I mean, you think back like, in the 80s and the 90s, country,
sure.
In the 70s, I mean, you had George Jones, Tammy Wynette, Loretta Lynn. You had all the iconic stars of country. And to a lot of fans that hear the new country, I mean, even when I remember when the 90s came out and they started having country more on the pop side, a little rock to it.
Yep.
People were saying, that's not country, that's not country. And then we got into the 2000s and then 2000, in the 2010 through 2020. And now we're into this where country music has evolved in such a way that it doesn't even come close to what the founders of country music was.
Yeah.
It's still what you hear on country radio, and it's still good music. And with me, I look at it, with my friends, and they'll say, well, that's not country. Well, it's not country like it used to be, but it's what they classify as country now. So you kind of have to go and they have to kind of earmark it a little bit and say, okay, this is today's country and here's traditional country. The only difference is traditional country now, you don't hear on the radio unless it's an oldie station, so you have somebody that comes out that wants to be more on the traditional side. It's harder for them to break through and make it into today's country, even though some have done it slightly, but they just haven't gotten that major impact. And like when you bring up Taylor Swift, when she started out, I mean, that was like 2005, somewhere in that range of every time. And no one perceived her as country. Nobody gave her a shot. And I'm, as much as I hate to say it, I mean, I was one of those that thought that she was, that first song of hers was kind of like, okay, that's kind of a novelty song, probably won't last. And then boom, she just happened to hit all the right things at the right time. That was when MySpace was going out,
Yeah.
and she was on MySpace and she was interacting with her fans, and she just built a great thing, and she's actually developed. I mean, she's developed into a good artist and a good singer and a good and definitely a good writer.
It's funny you mentioned you not thinking that she was going to be a big thing back in the day. It just brought back a memory. Back in the 80s, there was a group that was going to perform in the New York area. I was on a radio station doing a morning show and involved in a lot of stuff. And they were going to appear at a hotel venue. And I listened to it. I'm like, I don't know. I don't think it's that great. I don't know. I don't think we should promote it. I don't think you know who it was?
Who?
New Kids on the Block. It
Yeah.
was like, whoops, almost blew that one. But yeah, they came in, they performed, and everything was great. But when I first heard it, I'm like, it's a boy band thing. Well, how is that even going to get that? Song's not that great.
Yeah, and that shows, and that's where I think country music made their mistake. Because back in those times, the 80s, the 90s, you had major labels out there that would actually develop people. And for the first few releases, they probably wouldn't make any money. But then as they built and developed that artist, they started making money, they started doing well, and and everything was good. And then you fast forward a few years, and you got Achy Breaky Heart, and you got songs like that. And they started gearing themselves toward the teenagers that wanted to make country cool to the teenagers. And they thought it out probably, but I don't know if at the time if they thought it out as in depth as they should. Because when you bring up New Kids on the Block, that's a perfect example of how teenage listeners, live. Because in a period of a year, you had what? NSYNC, New Kids on the Block, and what was the other?
Backstreet Boys.
Backstreet Boys, right?
If you fast forward a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. So you had three boy bands, and each time the new boy band came out, the other boy band kind of got pushed off to the side. And it wasn't like what you did for me yesterday. It's what are you doing for me right now?
Yeah.
And right now, Backstreet Boys are cool, whereas NSYNC wasn't. So that happened in country. All of a sudden, they started putting out all these fast cuts and these sound-alikes, and you started getting big sales. But then all of a sudden, 6 months later, 8 months later, the new one comes out, and they push the other one aside. And the labels, how they used to develop and stand behind their artists, now started not being so loyal to their artists, and if they were loyal to the buck, because they had to keep they kind of dug themselves into a little trap there.
Yeah, it's funny you mention NSYNC, because Lance Bass just said the other day that we didn't become rich, we just became famous.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's because the producer, no longer with us, according to them, just took all the money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean that's happened, a lot. I mean, I know several different R&B singers and Motown singers that they're today they struggle to get by, and they had some of the biggest hits of all time, and because they just didn't have really good management, or they had good management but they were good for the management but not for them, and the money filtered in other places.
Wow. Yeah, I can't imagine that, somebody being so creative, and they probably don't have the skills to watch the management side, but you think that somebody's got your back. We're in this together until the money goes away.
Yeah, and it's sad too.
Yeah. Oh man. If you look at your music, what you've produced, what you produce for others, all of that, is there a genre that you'd say is kind of you? Would you say it's mostly country? Would you say it's a little more on the pop side? If you had to look at overall, what do you think it would be?
Well, when I first moved to Nashville, because I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston, so I was big in the blues and jazz, and because I was pop singer, back when I had my band and everything. So when I moved to Nashville, because it was a good place to be. It wasn't New York, it wasn't LA. It was more country, but the more that I had a few people that were friends of mine that had done some big things in Nashville, and they helped me with whatever I needed help with. But for the longest time, I had I struggled in getting productions because nobody knew me, you know.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden I started getting a few productions, and I started getting recognized by the labels and the major publishers, and I started getting more productions on country. And then I would have a few people that wanted to go on that pop side, and I would try and get some productions there. I could not buy a pop production because everything they heard that I was doing was country. And then slowly, I wound up working with an American Idol. He finished in the top 20, I guess, and I wound up producing him, and then a few other things fell in place, and then all of a sudden I'm producing a lot of pop, and then of course I started working with Jackie Wilson, and I was producing R&B. You
Wow.
know, so all that together, and came, and then I started doing more pop things. Younger people that wanted to get into the pop music, I was producing, and so now when I sit back and I look at the body of work that I've done, it's a collective mixture of many different styles of music. And I can't say that I have one that overshadows the other, because if anybody goes to my bio, or they look at, or go to my charts and they look at some of the songs that I produced and I put in the charts, I mean, I've got as many country as pop and AC, and I mean, I've got it's all over the spectrum.
So I want to go a little deep with you because you did mention blues.
Right.
Are you familiar with J.J. Cale?
Yeah.
What an amazing artist. And I look back at his work, and of course, he's the guy that inspired Eric Clapton with After Midnight and Cocaine. Those all came from J.J. Cale, but there's songs like Magnolia. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What a song. But when you look at that guy, then we're talking like, early 70s. His production value was insane. How good it sounded for back then.
Right.
And it's, I don't want to say especially for, a blues artist where you might not think it'd be that serious. They'd be that serious in terms of the production.
Right.
And also not to mention the fact that he sounds black. He's just amazing. Amazing guy from back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, it's and that's what I tell everybody is their key to a certain amount of success is the production values that they have. They've got to go out with the very best quality project that they can get. And so many people will say, "Oh, this is radio ready," or "This is this," or "This is that." And in reality, it's a good quality demo. It's stuff that you could pitch to labels, and then if the label heard it and liked it, then they might spend a little more money on it to really develop it into something that is a higher quality. And so many people that come to Nashville, New York, LA, for productions, unfortunately, they're coming from an area that they're used to a certain quality from studios in their area, but then they move to a Nashville, or New York, or LA, and the quality value at some of these studios in their worst situation is still way better than their local situation they have at home. They hear all this great production values. They go, "Oh, wow, listen to this. This is going to be a huge monster hit," when in reality, it's just good enough to get by to pitch to somebody to get something better.
Do
And
you
that's where
feel
people have to really watch it and listen.
well with today's technology, literally light years ahead of even 10 years ago? Do you think it's really good? But if, let's say somebody wants to do their own recording and they got some decent, outboard equipment, computer equipment, plugins, all of that. Do you think it doesn't even come close to being in a real studio?
No, I mean, you can have some people that will put together a really high quality project but for the most people, 90 9 out of 10, 99 out of 100, chances are they're not going to get that high-end quality that they would get by going into a studio. Because when you go into a studio, if you've got the musicians there and you've got a producer that knows what he's doing, a good engineer, and of course a good studio, then you've got that collaboration that can happen. Because when I take and bring in a singer and I put 5, 6 players in the studio with them, those 5 or 6 players, they played on some of the biggest hits that come out of Nashville. So because of that, they kind of have a production in their mind, a producer mentality. So when they know that something's going for radio, they're going to dig to get that high-end quality. I mean, I don't know how many times I've had a player in my studio working on a session, and they'll say, I got to do it one more time. I can do better. And we'll all be listening to him and going, there's no possible way that he can do that better. I mean, this is just tremendous. And then he'll blow us away because he'll do something better.
Wow.
So that's the benefit of having a studio and a mixture of people that have just done projects on the highest level. You get that kind of quality if you get the producer that will push him to get that.
Even when I think back, Tony, and I'm like you in terms of the audio, it's got to be primo.
Right.
I think back to some of the recordings over the years, and take the 70s and early 80s for Boston.
Right.
That they were ahead of their time in terms of production. Now, albeit, the couple of the guys in the band were perfectionists, and it would take them, 5 years to do stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were great.
Yeah.
And now to go to the opposite end of that,
Go.
Some of the biggest hits out of the 50s, 60s, and 70s were, you listen to it, the piano was out of tune. Guitar player maybe one of his strings were out of tune. You'd hear different flaws in it, but sometimes it was those flaws that you listen to and it's like, oh man, that is so sweet.
Yeah.
That you can't do. You could go and make it perfect, but then you've made it too good.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that being said, with digital technology, is it too pure? Is it too clean overall in your estimation?
Yeah, because I've always felt that you got to play it from the heart. I mean, when I went to Berkeley, I had a professor that it was improv teacher, and we were playing some things, and we were trying to make it as perfect as we could. And he goes, you can have technique up the yin yang, but if you don't have the heart, you've got nothing. And I've lived with that my whole life, because he was so right. Because you can have that perfection, that technique down, and you can play everything perfect, but if it doesn't have that inner soul, that portrays that you're really living and feeling this, then you've lost it all. You really don't, you haven't captured that. I've always told people that you have got to have a vocal performance in the studio, because when you, and that's a hard thing to do, because when you've got 100 people or 1,000 people or 25,000 people in front of you, and you're up there singing, you've got all those emotions, adrenaline running through you, your live crowd, you just like, boom, we're pushing it out there, and you've got everything in impact. When you're in the studio, you don't have any of that. You've just got to take and be able to put those emotions of those lyrics and those lines across to people, so that when they hear that for the first time or the 101st time, it still grabs them and they go, oh man, that's just so good.
It's a great point you bring up in perspective, because it's a difference between being in the studio and singing or performing. And there's the difference. I have to ask you this. Production value, Beatles. What's your opinion?
Well, I love it, because it was so simple, but it was so concise. Because if you go back and listen, to the Beatles, Meet the Beatles, the first one, and and then you listen to some of the music that's out today. I mean, today they've got the orchestration in it. They've used their Pro Tools and moved everything and just done everything. So it's just so perfect. With the Beatles, it was flawless in emotion because they got it out there, but perfection within the music itself wasn't there. But it was still perfect in the fact that it met the intensity that they was putting out there, so that people, they just bought into it and they grabbed a hold of it, and they became a phenomenon.
I look back and I'm embarrassed to say this, but I was never a huge Beatles fan when I was younger. Was only until I got older where I really truly appreciated putting on a pair of headphones and listening and just saying, man, that was good stuff. The way that was mixed and the way it sounded. But it blows my mind when you think the Beatles we're talking here 6 years. And in that time, writing, recording, producing, concerts, drugs, girls, religion, and
Right.
all of that. And they still brought on what they brought on. It's amazing. It
Yeah, it
really
is.
is.
And the sad part is, if they were just forming today, they wouldn't stand a chance. You know,
How do you mean that? How do you mean that?
because of the way that society has changed, the way that the labels have changed, the way that they want that perfection. They want everything to be almost A, B, C, D. You don't want to take and put D before C because it won't work. You know, I was thinking about going to a local college in my state, and you had you had to pass in that. I wanted to be music, but I had to take, it was almost like going to high school. I had to take English and geometry and all these other different things where I wanted to be a musician. And the counselor at the college says to me, goes, "You could be the next Beethoven. We still wouldn't take you." Yeah,
Wow.
because if you can't take and get grades in speaking or all these
Sure.
other things, then you can't do it, and you wouldn't even actually start on your major until your sophomore year. I'm
Yeah.
going, well, guess what I said, I'm not going there, because I didn't want to take, and I mean, I can understand, fast forward to now, why taking speaking and speech lessons and all that, and public speaking, that would be good, because sometimes when you're in music or doing some things, you're going to do some public speaking, and if it fits, that's great. But to make that a prerequisite that you've got to take that in order to be a musician, they're just losing the focus. It's not about the music.
Same thing with some students who are great athletes.
Right.
And if they don't have good grades, oh well, that's it. You
Right.
could have had a career as an amazing pro football player, but your grades are lame. It's not going to happen for you.
Exactly.
In the couple of minutes we have left, you have a really, really beautiful project that you're working on to create autism awareness. Tell us about that, Tony.
Well, the very cool part about this is, it started out as something to do to help bring attention to people that needed attention. And I really thought it would probably last 5 or 6 months, because it seems like every time that I do a promotion to help a charity or certain people that need help or whatever, it's got a kind of like a time stamp on it that it's going to last a certain amount of time, and then it's going to go
Sure.
away. You move on to your next one. This one has been completely different.
Hmm.
I've been working on this for over a year now, and I just released the video 5.5 months ago. And in that period of time, just so many things have opened up to me. I've got people calling me, and wanting to be part of it, and how can I do this? So I'm working on two things right now, actually three things. One of them is a new video for, I have Why Not Me Nashville. I'm going to do Why Not Me the World, because I've had so many people from around the world that want to give me short video clips or pictures and be part of the project. So I'm working on that. I'm actually working on another podcast. It's going to be called Why Not Me the World,
Oh, wow.
because I've got people from all over the world that want to tell me their story. And I've listened to other podcasts that deal with autism, and even just other podcasts that deal with any other special needs or Alzheimer's or anything, and they're good at telling people what the symptoms are, or what the medications you take, or this or that. But I haven't really run across anything that's just been about telling the story. So what I'm planning on doing with this podcast is I'm going to have people from different parts of the world, and they're going to tell me their story. Like, I've got a girl that lives just outside of London that's a poet. I mean, and she does spoken word, and she sent me the other day a poem she'd just written and spoken word, and it was just outstanding. So, and she's told me some things that she's gone through being autistic. I've talked with some people here in the States, and they've told me some things that they've gone through being autistic. And a lot of the stories are very similar. They're not exactly the same, but they have a similar quality to them in what they tell. And what I'm thinking, that if I can get somebody in London telling me their story, and then someone in New York happens to hear it, and they happen to be autistic as well, and they hear this London person and telling their story of different things that she's gone through in her life, and the New York person can say, well, she's going through some of the things that I've gone through. Maybe it will create a situation and a little bridge that will make people feel less alone. Because the one big thing that one autistic person told me is that he said that he was bullied through high school, and many times he felt alone.
Wow.
You know, so my whole process on this, and my whole statements in what I'm saying, is I'm trying to tell people that, hey, you know, hopefully we'll learn from things and get this, and so that way people in the world will feel less alone.
What a great idea. And everybody has a story, and those are stories that need to be heard. In a second here, I just want to mention David Byrne, Talking Heads.
Yeah.
Says that he hasn't been officially diagnosed, but he's dealt with what he believes is autism, and that's helped him in his music.
Oh yeah. I mean, I had a lady in London tell me that she had a son that was diagnosed autistic. And then after they started digging into it, she found that she had a lot of the same symptoms as he did. So
Yes.
she had the blood test and whatever, and she found out that she's autistic. And then she thinks her other son may be autistic, but because he's so intelligent, that his quirkiness from his intelligence masks the autism. So, I mean, I've just gotten so many stories from people, and it's like, it needs to be, you know, the world needs to hear these stories, because the biggest thing that I feel that maybe not the biggest thing, but one of the biggest things is, you know, we have Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, but you can be aware of it, you can accept it because you're aware of it, but until you understand it and hear the stories of other people, you don't really fully grasp what they're going through. So if we can make that bridge of where we can understand more, then if we run into someone that's autistic in a store, and all of a sudden or a person is autistic in the store, and they might be acting a little strange to us, we'll know how to handle that, you know, because one person actually in New York told me, she says people don't understand what we have to go through when our son goes into a store, and then all of a sudden he does something that's a little quirky to so-called normal people, but yet it's not quirky to him. It's just what he is. But the normal people, as they like to be called, don't understand it. Yeah. You know, so if we can understand it, then maybe we can make that more of a normal thing, because everybody is different. Whether we're autistic or not, everybody is different. So let's take and make a more level playing field for everybody. And even though they're different, we can still accept them and understand them, and maybe that'll help everybody.
I love it. And your timing is so perfect too, because more and more cases are being found. And a lot of what you just said, a lot of older adults are being diagnosed in their 30s and their 40s, looking at their children. Your website is your name, right? Tony Mantor, Mantor, TonyMantor.com. We can find out about the project and everything that you're working on. We had tons of stuff we were going to talk about. We didn't even get to it.
Right.
So maybe next time.
Yeah.
Always fantastic talking with you, and looking forward next time. Thanks a lot, Tony.
All right. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.